everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. And folks, you're looking at the club that owns the AL East champions, the Colorado Rockies, which makes them the AL East champs. The Colorado Rockies take down the Toronto Blue Jays 14-5 in a game that just, I think, everyone needed. And probably the best win for the Rockies in a very long time, and it's our first one of the season, and one in a bit of a wild one. If you haven't watched, or if you couldn't watch, or if you didn't check the box score, was definitely a bit of a weird one at first, and then the Rockies just poured it on in the sixth inning. But early on in the game, it was a bit strange. Cody Ponce has a bad error that turns into a bad knee injury. Knee discomfort is what causes him to leave the game. Kyle Karros scores on Jake McCarthy just dinging one over to first base, but it was in a place that was hard to reach, and so Cody Ponce tries to make a play on it, and who knows what the injury was. But the Rockies scored their first two runs on errors. It was Ponce, and then Clement also made a really questionable play. It looks like it bounced off his foot, and the Rockies had a 2-1 lead after the fifth inning. Springer took Sugano deep, and then in the sixth, the Rockies just absolutely opened this thing open. 7 runs in the sixth inning. They end up winning 14-5. We've got a lot to talk about, obviously, but most importantly, the Rockies win. And for the Rockies, one of the big things that we talked about was runners in scoring position. The Colorado Rockies, for whatever reason against Miami and all of last year, just failed miserably to drive in runs. In that Miami series, I think it was like 1 for 12 in that game 3 against Miami, with runners in scoring position. Tonight, 7 for 18, which is a huge bump. We mentioned that sixth inning. They score 7 runs on 6 hits, and it got opened up by Troy Johnson with a 2-run bomb driving in TJ Rumfield. And focusing on that for just a moment, those are 2 names that we're seeing as scraps from other teams. We're seeing as scraps from the Marlins, seeing as scraps from the Yankees, both making an impact so far this season. TJ Rumfield, he's hitting .357 on the year. He's been so good for the Rockies. He's got a let me check here. 643 slugging. Sorry, real time recording there. 643 slugging. He's hitting over 300. Went 2 for 5 today, or 3 for 5 today. Rumfield has been a revelation. Troy Johnson today goes 2 for 5. Troy Johnson's been a revelation early on in the season. Again, this is all very, very early, but extremely encouraging from 2 guys in a position battle where, let's face it, in the spring, you looked at the start of the position battle for first base, you're like, are we going to hand this to Blaine Krim because we don't know these other names? Are we going to hand it to Charlie Condon because he's the future? No, it's TJ Rumfield, who has looked so good at the plate. Troy Johnson, who has looked good at the plate. And so those 2 guys really got everything going in the sixth. But credit Warren Schaefer because he made moves. He takes out McCarthy for Doyle. Doyle goes 2 for 3 with 2 runs scored. He takes out Julian for Fulford, who goes 2 for 3, who also has a bomb and a pair of RBIs. So I thought, from Warren Schaefer's sake, offensively, he did, I thought, a really good job, and I want to touch on the lineup here in a second, but did a good job with some of those adjustments, and with pitching. We'll talk briefly about that, and then talk more about Sugano, but he takes out Sugano after just 4 2/3, and Sugano looked good. He was only at 72 pitches. His command was solid. only allowed 2 hits, but Springer, man, it was a matchup with George Springer once again. In his last matchup, Springer went yard. So what does he do? He goes to Hill in the bullpen. Hill, all he gave the Rockies was, I believe, one pitch. Yeah, one pitch, gets out of the inning, and he was done for the day. But really quickly, want to note on Warren Schaefer, because that was one of the big things, is matchups and being able to go to guys in the bullpen for a single at bat, being able to bring in hitters mid-game, right? Like, could be really easy to say, hey, well, look, McCarthy's going to get right at this at bat. No, we're not going to mess with that. Let's get Brenton Doyle to the plate. Let's get Fulford to the plate in crunch time situations to try to drive in runs. That will be the mindset moving forward, is understanding those situations. And today was a really big positive, because the Rockies just blew the doors off of the Blue Jays in a game where I think a lot of us were like, I don't know what's going to happen. But because of Ponce's injury early on in this one, Toronto was forced to go to their bullpen early. And it just felt like it was a damn ready to break for the Rockies over the course of these last couple of games. And so to see Castro and Tovar, to see a lot of success throughout the lineup is a big deal. And it says turning around. That's just turning around that inability to drive in runs. It's just one game. It is something that they will need to overcome all season long, because it's still probably one of the bigger fears. But this is really encouraging. I mean, it's encouraging from these younger guys and from guys that you acquired in the offseason who make a difference today against, obviously they were the best team in the AL last year, and they're arguably one of the best teams in the AL this year. So a really solid win for the Rockies from this lineup. And what a way to get your first one of the season. You've got 2 more against these guys now. But that does feel good for a start of the year that was obviously disappointing, where you probably could have won 1 or 2 games in Miami. But focusing on the lineup itself, there is one thing that I think needs to be addressed. It's obviously early on in the season, but there is a black hole in this lineup. It is a dark void of negativity, of baseball that I certainly don't want to watch. And that is going from the 9-hole of Edward Julian to Jake McCarthy leading off. I know we're only 4 games in. I know you can't overreact. I don't think I need to see it anymore. I don't think I need to see these 2 guys going back-to-back. Of Edward Julian watching a 3-2 count, pitch, just touch the strike zone for a strike 3. Jake McCarthy, who seemingly doesn't like to hit balls out of the infield. I don't need to see it anymore. All right, I just don't need to see it. And so I love seeing Brenton Doyle come in. I love seeing Fulford come in. And truthfully, I think McCarthy will have a spot in the outfield just with the injuries right now to Freeman and Moniak. And Jordan Beck's bat hasn't been hot early on. But look, Beck got robbed of probably what would have been a big-time infield single, or not infield single. It would have been robbed of a single or a double. I was too busy thinking about McCarthy. He's still in my brain. I can't get him out. But Kazuma Okamoto made a really solid diving play on the third base line that definitely stole a single or a double from Beck. But man, you get to the bottom of that lineup, and Kyle Karros has looked actually solid, but then it's like Edward Julian. Lord help us. If you pray, I'm praying right now. Okay, he strikes out. What's next? Top of the lineup. Great. That sounds nice. Who do we got? Oh, it's Jake McCarthy, who's batting a smooth 071. He did have an RBI today, and you could argue the error on that play by Ponce, it could have been an infield single because of how quick McCarthy is. But, man, those were the 2 worries with those 2 guys. Their bats did not look good in 2025, and in the early slugging of 2026, they have both looked pretty out of place at the plate. And I think Warren Schaefer recognizes that. I think that's why you saw Doyle get plugged in and immediately make a difference. And this is Doyle, who didn't have a hit all year. And he goes 2 for 3 against Toronto. But honestly, the rest of the lineup, like, there's a lot of different plug-and-play guys that I like. Castro is interesting just because he struggled, but he had arguably one of the biggest hits of the night. So where this lineup goes, I like Goodman at 2. I like getting him as many at-bats as possible. I'd honestly consider maybe even bumping Tovar up to batting 3rd or batting 1st. Like, I would not mind seeing Tovar 1, Goodman 2, but then maybe you have a hole at 3 or 4, unless you're confident when Moniak comes back. And Moniak bats 3 and Rumfield bats 4, Johnson and company beyond. Moral of the story, there is still some plug and play, and there are actually some solid options with this lineup. But I don't know how far in the season you go because look, Edward Julian was DH today. And it's like, I don't know if you really want him being your DH. That's kind of the moral of the story. I just don't know, especially when you bring in Fulford and he immediately makes an impact. I think Julian's days could be limited, and his big benefit of the doubt is he did force some 3-2 counts, but he just doesn't swing the bat. Swing the bat, man. It was, I think, the 4th inning. It's like a 3-2 pitch, runners on 1st and 2nd. He just watched one for strike 3. But regardless, that's enough about the lineup. Moral of the story, we don't need to see Julian and McCarthy backing each other up to 9-1. But you have some solid bats here, and you probably have more solid bats once Freeman and Moniak come back. And I think that's when the lineup could really pop. But there's still some dogs in this lineup, man. Rumfield and Johnson, I'm telling you, those have been some really fun acquisitions that have really stepped up in the early part of the season. So good stuff there. Let's end the show with Sugano, who, look, header says it all. Best start of this early season belongs to Sugano, who only goes 4 2/3. And like we kind of talked about, I think he goes longer. However, with that matchup against Springer, you tip your cap to Warren Schaefer of making Springer have to see someone else in Jaden Hill. But Sugano only goes 72 innings, or 72 pitches in this game, 4 2/3 innings pitched. And yeah, he looked good, man. He really did look good today. And he's going to be, again, he's the most interesting signing of the Rockies. I found it so interesting to see how he would do because he was so successful in Japan and then bad in Baltimore. And now he comes to probably the hardest team to pitch for, and he has a really solid debut. Jaden Hill gives you 1 inning or 1 pitch and 1/3 of an inning's work. Good job, got a big out. Honestly, could have been seen as the biggest out of the game, right? Because then the Rockies break it open and there's no hope for Toronto. And then Chase Dollander, he actually gets the win for this game. And he actually has 74 pitches in this game. He looked okay. He had 5 strikeouts, so that was there, but he also gave up 5 hits, gives up 3 home runs. So ultimately, you look at Dollander's debut for the Rockies, and it's shaky. But you know what? You'd rather have him be shaky in a debut in a game that you are absolutely dominating in. So it's a good test for Dollander. It's a good reminder that he's got work to do. And now the guy who took his spot is going to be starting tomorrow or today in Ryan Feltner. I'm recording on Monday. Game's Tuesday. Ryan Feltner getting the nod. And that's going to be a really interesting start because of kind of that competition that surrounded that 5th and final start between Gordon, Dollander, and Feltner. Dollander starts the year with a lackluster performance. Let's be real. Four innings pitched and 4 earned runs is not something to have a lot of pride in. But again, it's in a blowout, so there could be some of that. And he does have 5 strikeouts, so that is the positive. Now it's Ryan Feltner's turn. But regardless, the Colorado Rockies, they take down the Toronto Blue Jays, folks. What more could you want to start your week? A week that it was like, oh my gosh, we've got Toronto and then the Phillies. No, it doesn't matter. The Rockies, until we see otherwise, they own the AL East. I could be recording tomorrow saying the AL East owns the Rockies. But until then, we celebrate. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a wonderful day. And I will see you tomorrow.